The more I spend time with this thing, the more I like it. I got this computer some time ago. It was given to me in the mail by a friend I had who just had it around. She had kind of overworked the computer. It wasn't working as well as it used to. Specifically, one thing that often happened was she got it really hot and just wasn't very concerned about it because she could easily just replace the technology at any time. So she wasn't too careful with it. And it had been in storage for a year or so, but it was great for me because at the time I had this shitty Windows XP computer that was barely working, and having a computer like this was like heaven on earth to me, being able to have something I could use. At the time, it had Windows 10 put on it, and I didn't like Windows 10 aesthetically very much at all, um, combined with the fact that it just ran slower than it should have. I tried using Windows 10 for quite some time, and then eventually I ended up breaking and having to install Linux because it was just so difficult to use on a consistent basis. It would just always crash. If I moved this computer even slightly, the entire thing would crash. And so I got stuck having to put the computer on a vent or always having a fan near it, or outright just having to reboot every 30 minutes or so because the computer would just crash or turn itself off and on. But as much disdain as I had for this computer at one point, I felt more and more nostalgia for it as I've continued to learn how to operate Linux better. Because the theme that I'm currently using here, or rather the distro, is LXDE, the lightweight uh, desktop variant for Ubuntu. Ubuntu, for a lot of people, isn't as good as Arch, but Ubuntu was the first one I put on, so it's just been the one I've continued to use because all of my data is on here. So I've been trying out all these different desktops. I've been putting on a lot more of the essential software that I hadn't necessarily known about in the past, learning about, getting Wine to be more in tune with Steam to make Steam run other games properly. And I've come to realize that a lot of games on this computer actually run better here than they did on my main desktop computer. It's because of the power of Linux, the power of resource management, that this computer is able to actually run better than the other one. Um, I mean, it is a 2014 computer, whereas the other one is a 2011, 2010 computer. And it was just kind of like a mass-produced computer that was meant to be used in offices and stuff. It's not great at running games, but I can run Counter-Strike on there at like really low frame rates. And I'll just sit there for hours playing it at bad frame rates, getting my ass kicked if, I'm with people who are particularly good. The other day I got like a first place, second place, third place again and again and again, like every round I got into, and it was pretty amazing to me. I think it was because I had my VPN on that I was playing I was playing with people in Japan. So maybe maybe that was what did it. I have no idea. But like look at this CS. You can just turn CS on with this computer, and it looks HD. You can tell it's HD, you can tell it's running okay. Whereas with the other machine, it'll just default, it'll crash a lot of the time. Or if it doesn't crash, I've only ever had it crash on me once. But if it doesn't crash, it just goes extremely slow, like it's about to crash, especially in very important matches. And so it can be really, really annoying trying to play this game on that computer. But this one, most games run fine because the power of Linux allows you to make it to where you can put on, a different distro, and it can still run off the same Ubuntu framework and run all of the programs that would work with Ubuntu. But the resources have been managed or changed slightly to make it to where games like this can run better than they once did. Um, and the fact that I can take an entire computer that can play full games like this, and I can just have it here in my lap as I'm laying in bed. If I want to listen to a podcast or something with my headphones, all I have to do is just put the headphones on. There's no other steps. You just put them on and then you play the game. You listen to what you're supposed to be listening to. If I want to watch anime, I just have to get in bed and then put the laptop here. If I just have the laptop here, get headphones, get into the game, and then you just play. Like, there's nothing too complex about that. You just start it up, and then you're going fine. There's something really, really comfy about being able to just take the experience with you, being able to just do things, not having to worry about whether or not I'm sitting at the desktop chair or whether or not I have exactly the right hardware. You just get better software to be able to run the games better. And then once you get into like knowing how Linux works and stuff and knowing how to use it effectively, it makes laptops like this, ones that did not work very well with their Windows infrastructure, become better than desktop PCs. This was initially a broken, shitty PC when I first got it, and now, I can just sit here playing Counter-Strike. There's a kind of nostalgia I have for it because when I first got this PC, I was just torrenting anime constantly. That's all I was doing was torrenting anime. Um, and I was making a lot of videos on it because my computer had been basically broken at that point that I needed something that I could make videos on. And I remember just how excited I was the fact that I could get Sony Vegas Pro 13 working despite the fact that, it did crash in the middle of rendering videos at times. I was just so excited that I could get it to work. And then I had kept downloading and watching all of these shows again and again and again. And it gave me a real sense of excitement sitting in that desk chair and just playing on the laptop. Gave me a sense of comfiness, freedom, like I had the right technology to do the right thing. And looking back in Maine, when I was in Maine, I had absolutely nothing to do. I would just play Half-Life 2 on this laptop. The most depressed period of my life I was ever in. I had Half-Life 2 to play, and I had the Sega Saturn emulator. And I could go to the laundromat down the street. I say down the street, it was quite a ways away, but I could walk down there and I could just be in there or be in the library downloading stuff throughout the day and then come home with it to a house that had no internet to download things otherwise. And when I was in those nights of just severe depression, it gave me something to do, something to be occupied by, a little comfy world to escape into when I was experiencing terrible things. And I have this laptop to thank for that. Really, I have the friend who gave it to me all that time ago to thank for that. And even now, with the better, or so I thought, desktop computer that I have, the more traditional setup that I would have used, I can't help but find myself spending hours yet again on this old laptop playing these Linux games. It feels special. Something about it, something about the comfiness of everything you know and love being comprised into one little machine. You don't have to carry it everywhere, not to the degree that you would have with a desktop, put the whole damn thing in a suitcase or anything like that. You just have it. And I can be in any part of the room I want to be with this. It feels truly liberating to play and work on a laptop. I often say that your computer is kind of like your home when you spend a lot of time on there, is that your room, you want to calibrate and categorize your room in all of the right ways. in order to make your room have the defining aesthetic that is you. You want your room, your living space, to represent things about yourself and to be cultivated towards your interests so you're more happy and healthy within that living space. Those interests can be any set of things. Some people's aesthetic interest is to be dirty and unique and weird. But regardless, the function that it's meant to serve is to optimize your living experience. When you spend as much time on your computer as I do, it isn't so different because now the living experience that you're trying to optimize is the act of sitting on your computer, changing the backgrounds, changing the desktops that you're using, changing the specific rotations of games you might have, just picking out the hardware in the first place. All of these things are going to be a determination of what your quality of life is in this post meat space world that you found yourself in. And so, depending on what kind of computer you have, depending on what it means, what it represents to you, and the way you've tooled it towards your set of interests, whether that be booking out your browser with lots of bookmarks on the toolbar to Chan sites the way I would, or decking out your backgrounds with anime. The fact is that your computer is going to be a monolith within your life. It's going to be something that oftentimes will carry you through a lot of things. There's entire sections of my life I can just attribute to these little machines in our rooms. As I said, that entirely depressed period in my life, maybe I was happy like one time, if you could even call it that. The fact that I had this allowed me an outlet, and so I spent a lot of time on this. And when I look at it, the memories that it signifies aren't just a matter of machinery and societal progress or the fact that it was gifted to me. It's also all of the time that I've spent on it, which includes those many nights of depression and sadness where this really was the only thing I had. And I can't separate those memories from this computer. It's almost like the embodiment of these different experiences I've had over time, all of them culminating into one, all of them meaning something. I guess that's why I never really gave up this machine when I thought it was time to retire it forever and to let go of it, because I thought, well, my desktop is obviously superior, so why even pay attention to this one? Well, lo and behold, a few tweaks, and it ends up working better than the one before. Doesn't even crash very much anymore, no matter how much I move it. Well, that's not entirely true. I've had live streams break, but that's also kind of a Linux issue as well. Um, I don't know. I thinking about this earlier today, and um, thinking about Noah's ThinkPad, because he lost his ThinkPad recently. I think it was in his newest video where he talked about how his ThinkPad had broken and died. Um, and since I had been doing these live streams on this computer for the last couple days now, I've been getting really into live streaming on the second channel. It had me think about just how much this computer means to me, just how many experiences I've taken with it. I mean, I still have my Windows XP machine that was built, dear Lord, however many years ago. It was quite some time ago that that machine was built, and I still keep it with me to this day because to me, it represents an entire period in my life. No, I still remember all of the foundational YouTube videos that I watched on that machine that were my favorites at the time, that back when I was first getting into the medium, all of the videos that I desperately tried to render with the minimum amount of software you could find on Windows XP at the time through Google searches. Most of it was woefully inadequate for the kind of content I was making. And then when I forced Windows 7 onto it, all of the constant crashes when I was trying to render videos at 240p are things that I just can't forget. The hours upon hours that I would spend in the timeline in the Sony Vegas timeline, trying to fix little bitty problems with audio, that I would have an entire podcast where the audio would be out of sync. And so I would have to manually cut all of the audio clips together each time someone spoke. Those were all things I did on that old ass Windows XP computer in my foundational days on YouTube. The first 3 years I spent really making things. Um, I mean, I didn't really retire the computer until 2018, so yeah, I used that for a fucking long time. And I was just constantly walking on eggshells with it, trying to do the best I could with what I had. My mom's laptop wasn't always reliable. She had a Windows XP one for a while that worked pretty bad. Then she got a Windows 10 one way later, and it always worked really dodgy. It worked sometimes to make videos, and then other times it didn't. I mean, she stole it from a magazine. So she said, oh, I'll just get it on layaway. So you had to pay per month for it. But she just never paid the guys back. Like, she paid $50 in payments for a $1,000 laptop at the time, but the laptop ended up not working and being really bad anyway. Um, so I think about the journey that I took with all those different computers, and how each one of them kind of signifies a period in my life, a timeline, a place, an emotion that I was feeling. And I think there's something really cool about that just these physical objects can embody so much of your life, because it's not like a toy. It's not like when you look at an action figure, you're like, oh, I played with this action figure so many times, and in the background my life was also happening, and so it kind of makes me remember that. With computers, when you're spending all day on them, it really is something that just consumes your life. Like, by that point, it just is your world. You're just in that wired space. Um, and I find that to be a really interesting dynamic, because I remember the emotions I was experiencing. I remember how I was thinking at the time, but I also remember that 12 hours of that day was spent, playing Half-Life 2 or listening to podcasts and stuff. And I remember what I was listening to at the time. And it helps me kind of piece together who I was and what I was thinking, all through memories of what I was doing online. The ideas I would be exposed to and the things that I was feeling would so heavily be influenced by what I saw on the computer. And it's weird to me to think of that these memories can be um, put into groups of what computer I was using, or what era, what operating system. Whenever I siphon these things off in this way to categorize them in these spans of time, um, it always puts a perfect picture in my head in a way that before I got really heavy into the computer, I just couldn't. And I find that act of remembering things through this strange machine really fascinating. And I like it. It makes me feel nostalgic.